The movie features a nursing assistant named Ruth. She has no family, very few friends, and a lousy job, which makes her deal with cranky old patients. Ruth frequently finds herself thinking about her purpose in life and is currently going through a midlife crisis. One day at work, she is taking care of a cranky old lady who dies while yelling racial slurs at the TV. Ruth has witnessed several patients die since working as a nurse, but the death still makes her feel sad. When she gets home, she is bothered by the dog shit in her front yard when she clearly has a sign asking owners to clean up after their dog's mess. Inside the house, she is shocked to find the living room in shambles. The house has clearly been burglarized, and the thief has taken her laptop, some medicine, and a box of her grandmother's silverware. The police are called and an investigation is held, but the chief detective blames Ruth for leaving her back door open. Since the crime is not that serious, they promise to update her if anything is found and simply drive away. Ruth is frustrated and thinks they are irresponsible. She wants to get her stuff back, not because she can't replace it, but because she is tired of people being foul to her. That evening, she goes over to her friend Emily's house and tries to put her daughter to sleep. But all of the frustration from the day overwhelms her, making her break into tears. The kid calls her mother, who drags Ruth into the living room. She talks to Emily about her feelings and reveals how she wants to teach the burglar a lesson. After spending the night over, Ruth returns home to yet again see dog shit in her front yard. This time, she knows who the culprit is because the guy is walking his dog nearby. Ruth picks up the mess and throws it at the man, but misses. The guy, named Tony, apologizes for not noticing what his dog did and walks away. A few hours later, Ruth is in her backyard trying to figure out how the thieves must have entered her home. She suddenly notices a footprint by the fence and realizes it must be the burglars. Thinking of this as her chance to catch them, she makes a mold of the footprint. It is like any normal shoe print, except the front part of the shoe seems to have been held in place by tape. Ruth thinks she is getting closer to cracking the case. Next, she goes around her neighborhood, asking people if they've seen anyone suspicious nearby. Most people say they haven't and quickly dismiss her. That is, until she reaches Tony's place. Upon finding out what happened to his neighbor, Tony is enraged. He pulls out his nunchuck in anger, scaring even Ruth. She quickly excuses herself and runs back home, thinking of Tony as a weirdo. That night, she gets a notification saying that someone has opened her laptop. The GPS works, and she can now see exactly where it is. Ruth doesn't wait a second before calling the police and asking them to get her laptop for her. However, the dispatcher on the phone claims that she can add the information to the report, but she cannot send anybody to the location at the moment. No matter how much Ruth tries to convince the person, she is asked to handle the situation on her own. At last, she hangs up and drives to the location herself. There, a bunch of people are partying and playing with weapons. Ruth quickly drives back home, deciding to return with a backup. She tries calling Emily's husband, but it turns out he's busy, which leaves only one option: Tony. He instantly agrees to help and even collects his ninja weapons in case he needs them. They arrive at the culprit's house again and see a man smoking outside. He refuses to let them in, and in a moment of rage, Tony hits him with a handmade weapon. Inside, a group of 3 people have Ruth's laptop open in front of them. Tony barges in and throws his ninja star into a wall to assert dominance. It doesn't really work, but Ruth manages to snatch the laptop from the group. They simply let her take it, but the man reveals that he bought it from a pawn shop nearby and paid good money for it. Then we are introduced to Chris, the guy who broke into Ruth's house. He is a registered felon and a professional when it comes to stealing. He is at a house party stealing jewelry in the bathroom. Even when a woman asks him why he didn't go to the guest bathroom, he remains calm and tells her it was an emergency. The house owners still suspect him and send a man to interrogate him. Chris gets into a fight with the man and speeds away in his van. A while later, he stops by a forest to meet the rest of his gang, Marshall, and Des. The three became friends in prison a few years ago and have been surviving off stealing ever since then. Somewhere else, Ruth and Tony drink together to celebrate getting her laptop back. But Ruth is still not satisfied and wants to get her silverware as well. The following day, she goes to the pawn shop where her laptop was sold. Fortunately enough, she finds her silverware on one of the shelves, but is too scared to steal it. Just then, thinking of a way to get out of the situation, she sees Chris. Judging by the taped shoes he is wearing, Ruth is convinced he's the guy that broke into her house. She follows him outside, but is stopped by the shop owner. They get into an altercation, which ends up with the man breaking her finger. Chris and his group drive away in the van, while Tony gets Ruth to a hospital. Later that day, Tony reveals that he managed to memorize the license plate from the burglar's van. He Googles it on a website and figures out Chris's name and address. With this information, Ruth goes to the police station and shows the detective all the evidence she has collected up to now. The man dismisses her yet again, claiming that the police have more serious matters to deal with. They argue about it for a while, with Ruth insisting that Chris is the culprit, but the detective doesn't believe her. Instead, he starts talking about his own life and how he is divorcing his wife. Ruth leaves abruptly and decides to take matters into her own hands yet again. First, she goes to the grocery store and picks up a cereal box that has a free plastic police badge inside. She plans to use the badge to pretend to be the police and interrogate Chris. Tony supports the idea and drives her to the address they found on the internet. However, the house they reach doesn't seem like it belongs to a burglar. It is massive, and instead of the lousy van they've been following around, there is a nice car in the driveway. The duo is received by a friendly woman named Meredith. Ruth shows her the fake badge for a second and asks if they can come inside to talk. Meredith happily invites them in and offers them coffee. It turns out that the house belongs to Chris Sr., Chris's father, who happens to be a renowned lawyer. He kicked his son out of the house a few months ago because of his stealing habits. Meredith hates her stepson because he has been to jail, done drugs, and is in general a bad person. As they chat, Chris Sr. arrives with his secretary and yells at the guests to surrender. Even Meredith reveals that she knew they were not real cops. She invited them in because she was lonely and wanted to have a chat. The secretary points his gun at the duo and asks them why they are here, making Ruth reveal that they are here for Chris Jr. His father offers them money to go away, but Ruth refuses to take it, claiming that she is here to make the burglar pay for breaking into her house. After being kicked out, Ruth loses her mind and starts destroying their yard decoration. She then even goes as far as to steal their yard tiger. Tony repeatedly asks her to leave the tiger behind, but she doesn't listen. After they drive away, we see Chris Jr. and his group have been watching them all along. They are planning to rob Chris's father and kill him for kicking Chris out of the house. But now that they know Ruth is trying to get them, Marshall insists that they find out her part in all of this before the robbery. This way, they can avoid any mistakes and kill Ruth as well if she knows more than she's supposed to. In the following scene, we see that Tony is furious at Ruth for stealing the tiger and no longer wants to support her unless she returns it. He goes home for the first time since they started hunting down the burglar, leaving Ruth alone. She too enters her house and finds Chris waiting for her. In a moment of panic, she hits him with the mold of his feet, almost breaking his neck. Chris runs outside to his friends, but is hit by a truck trying to cross the road. He dies in the accident. Ruth, alongside Des and Marshall, is shocked beyond words. Ruth quickly dials 911, but while she does, Des hits her on the head and knocks her out. Upon waking up, she finds herself in a van. Des and Marshall are wearing masks to cover their faces. It turns out that they want Ruth to take Chris's place in their plan because they desperately need his father's money. They threaten her and give her a gun with no bullets so she won't try to go against them. Next, she is made to break into the house by terrorizing Meredith, and the other two join in. They instantly hold the security guard hostage, knowing that he is the biggest threat. Des is annoyed because Chris Sr. is not around. They make Meredith call him downstairs, but the man realizes something is wrong. He gets his gun and tries to sneak into the living room, only to be shot in the hand by Des. In a corner, Ruth starts vomiting uncontrollably. The security guard tries to get her gun, but quickly finds out it has no bullets and is killed in an altercation with Marshall. After that, he makes Chris get into the fireplace, where he has hidden a secret safe with a lot of money. Chris laughs at Marshall's face because it turns out he has already transferred the money to the bank. Angry that their plan didn't work, Des tries to kill Meredith, but Ruth comes in between them. She is seconds away from being shot when a ninja star hits Des in her face. Tony, who came to return the lawn tiger, stands at the doorway. Des tries to kill him, but her gun that she got from a pawn shop breaks. It instead sends a bullet backward, killing Chris. Next, Des goes for Tony, and Ruth fights Chris. Tony is stabbed several times before Ruth manages to shoot Des and kill her. Amidst all of this, Meredith runs away and saves her life. Ruth holds an injured Tony up and runs outside while being followed by Marshall. When Tony cannot walk anymore, she leaves him in the woods and attracts Marshall to herself. The chase goes on for a while before Ruth falls into a ditch and encounters a snake. She slowly gets away from it and waits for Marshall to get to her. Once he is close enough, she tricks him into being pushed into the puddle, where he is eventually bitten by the snake. At last, we see her running away. The scene changes to a few hours later. Meredith is at the police station, telling the cops everything that happened. Ruth is also brought in, and the detective finally has to believe her. A few days later, we see Ruth continuing with her life as usual. While hanging out with Emily on the weekend, she turns around and sees Tony. This is when we find out that he was saved by Ruth that day. The two are now a couple and living a happy life. If you enjoyed this movie recap, make sure to hit the like button. And if you want to see more of these, subscribe to the channel and check out our other videos.